And I remember just saying, I'm going to go into and I've done this for 20 years. I'm not going to go in with any book knowledge. I have all this knowledge, but I'm just going to I'm going to go in like an Etch-a-Sketch with each patient, just be there and just take it and trust myself there's that whole tension between spontaneity and rote knowledge. And I always think of Miles Davis as the archetype of someone who knew a hell of a lot but clearly lived in a receptivity to what spontaneously arises in spite of everything he knew every day.
Hello, Chia-logicians. Chia-logician? Where did that come from? Anyway, this is Chia-logical, the podcast for practitioners and students of acupuncture and East Asian medicine. I'm Michael Max. Hey, first, thank you, those of you that have sent in pictures and postcards from the places where you listen to Chia-logical. I really appreciate it. Sometimes I sit here in front of this computer staring into the void and wondering, God, I wonder who's listening. So I love getting these emails, postcards, and photos of where you're listening to Chia-logical at. Much appreciated. If you're enjoying the podcast and you find it helpful in your study or practice of medicine, please turn your friends onto it. Like ice cream, it's best when you share it with others. And in that spirit, I've got a podcast for you. If you're not already familiar with Laszlo Montgomery over at the China History Podcast, you ought to check it out. He's got a great series over there on tea, another one on Chinese philosophy, and of course the usual lineup of luminaries and villains from China's long, long history. In addition, and this part's really cool, he highlights some Westerners who have made their lives and some kind of impact in the Middle Kingdom. I'm particularly fond of the show on Morris Two-Gun Cohen, the ne'er-do-well Jewish thug who ends up as Sun Yat-sen's bodyguard. Oh man, what an episode. Actually, 2 episodes that is. So when you need a break from medicine and you still have a taste for something Chinese, Laszlo's your man at the China History Podcast. I want to take a moment before we get into today's show and share with you something that came up in clinic for me the other day. Perhaps you've had this happen too. While you're looking at a patient's tongue, he or she might ask, hey, is it bad? I'm always careful about answering that question. But the other day, I found myself saying to a patient, good, bad, it's not a helpful way to consider the tongue or the pulse for that matter. Really, it's just an indicator of what's going on. And I'm quite reluctant to judge it as good or bad. Granted, there can be an excess or deficiency that's showing up, and some serious problems can clearly be seen if you know how to look. But the terms good and bad, I think they're rather useless. It's better to be able to see clearly what's present or maybe even what's missing. I'm finding that the terms, air quotes here, good and bad, really may not be that helpful. They don't really tell you anything or offer any useful information. The words are like check marks in a box, something you can feel good about and forget, or feel bad about, and then let the mind start its endless cycle of worry and fear. Neither is really helpful. When you think about it, good and bad are handy terms to attempt to get children to behave. In social groups, the labels are a quick metric for who's in and who's out. These labels, when applied to people, allow us to quickly characterize them without going deeper into understanding. Maybe labeling something good or bad is fine if you're looking for a stick to hit yourself or others with. Again, too often applying these labels stops the process of inquiry that can take us into something more complex and nuanced. Digging a little deeper into what you dismiss as good or bad will get you a lot more information about the situation. I've been more attentive this week to using the labels good and bad, and I'm noticing that when I use them, it makes me mentally lazy. I stop looking for the puzzling details. It requires me to stay a little more awake and attentive. And I'm surprised at how often I make those snap value judgments and then turn off the thinking process. Being awake and attentive is part of the conversation that we're going to be getting into here in just a moment as we discuss adverse reactions to acupuncture and how these situations can help us to learn something. It seems to require a certain amount of maturity on both the part of the patient and the practitioner to not let unforeseen reactions stop what might be an important turn in a patient's healing process. I'm hoping that dropping this good and bad thing will help me to become more of that kind of practitioner. One more thing before we get into today's conversation. You've probably heard me go on about sound quality on the podcast. The longer I do this podcast, the more I see ways to help improve the listening experience for you. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. All the sponsors here provide helpful products or services that you'll find beneficial in your clinical work. Want to get better at treating concussions and other neurological conditions? Clayton Shoe has some innovative methods. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. Later in the show, Jane offers you helpful suggestions on how to raise your rates, and Golden Flower Chinese Herbs shares a journey of healing that I think you'll recognize. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Geological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more. Ever found yourself listening to a geological conversation and thinking, wow, I needed to hear that? Yeah, me too. And I never know when I'm going to hear a guest say something that stops my world and reboots it with a larger perspective. If these conversations have ever helped you to feel more grounded, more inspired, or just less alone in this strange and wonderful work we do, consider becoming a member or supporting the podcast with a bit of tithing to the donation jar. It helps keep the lights on here at the Geological Sound and Motion Lab so that we can bring you these conversations every Tuesday morning. You'll find all the details at geological.com. Thanks for listening and for being a part of this.
Hey there, I'm Cameron Jafari, an acupuncturist from Los Angeles. So I started learning nanopuncture from Dr. Clayton Shoe because I was facing these complex neurological conditions like stroke and MS in my clinic, and I just felt like I lacked a solid process to treat them. Brain-related issues always felt like a whole different animal, and I was looking for a clinical system that worked and could guide me through them. So after attending my first nanopuncture seminar, I was able to apply the process pretty quickly and with pretty amazing results. I remember the first stroke patient I saw afterwards was a guy who had had a stroke 2 years back, and he couldn't talk at all. And after a few treatments, he started saying a few words. And a few treatments after that, he could actually have conversations. It was pretty incredible. So this is why I feel like nanopuncture is the future of acupuncture neurology. And you can be a part of that. Their next seminar is on treating concussions and is being co-taught by both Dr. Shoe and Dr. Ayla Wolf in New York City on April 26th and 27th. To learn more, visit nanopunctureseminars.com.
I've got Daniel Schulman with me today. I can't remember how we actually connected. My internet-addled brain has trouble keeping track of things that used to seem so simple. But what I do remember is we began a discussion about adverse effects from acupuncture. And that started to turn into a conversation about whether acupuncture was simply harmonizing or if you could really cause your patients some problems with an incorrect treatment. You know, we like to think that acupuncture is powerful medicine. So like Fuzi or Mahuang, you can do a person a lot of good. But, you know, if used incorrectly, you might cause some troubles. And how do you sort that out from just the kinds of adverse reactions sometimes people have to any kind of a treatment, depending on what's going on with them? This seemed like a good topic to chew on here at Geological. And I'm really curious to see where Daniel and I go. Daniel, welcome to Geological.
Oh, it's great to be here. I love your show.
Thank you. I have fun with it. I get a new teacher every week.
Yes, it's clear you're having a lot of fun.
And getting away with it too.
I know. You'll have to write a book about that.
Oh my God. I've already got a couple of book projects. Yeah. I'll add it to the list.
Okay.
Actually, since you just brought that up, let me ask you a question. What kind of book would that be? What would I write?
What, how to have fun and get away with it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, the new age world's full of, follow your passion and all that stuff. So you'd have to steer clear of that.
Yeah.
That market is full.
That market well, it's not even a market I'm interested in.
Exactly.
Yeah. Every time I've set out to go do something that I thought was a good idea, that usually didn't pan out. It's the stuff that came in from the periphery that like barely caught my attention, but I couldn't quite let go of that. That's the stuff that stuck.
That's where the action is, I think.
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, the thing I always think of is, when you're looking at the night sky, the best falling stars are the ones you catch out of the corner of your eye.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're not looking, but I call it a light gaze. Actually, that's when I do my best work in clinic, is when I'm looking at the patient, but lightly from an edge, from a side, not directly, not with too much, forced intention or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. That thing about coming at it from the peripheral vision.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, let's see here. Where are we going to begin with this? We were talking about adverse reactions to acupuncture, and then you turned me on to an article that you did. Oh my God, it was like ages ago, like 2004 or something.
Yeah. One of those embarrassing things where you go back and you look and you say, "Oh God, I'd write that so differently today."
Well, of course you'd write it differently today. That just goes without saying. But I did go to the Journal of Chinese Medicine and download it because I subscribe to it. So I get, the great thing about the Journal of Chinese Medicine, if you're a subscriber, you've got access to the whole back catalog. It's kind of like Qiological, right? You can listen to the whole dang thing if you want.
There's a lot there too.
Yeah, there's a lot there at the Journal of Chinese Medicine. So, yeah, you wrote this article about adverse reactions. I read it. I actually thought it was quite spot on. I thought it held up over the years.
Yeah, I think the meat is there for sure. And I was trying to open up a richer conversation. We tend to there's this superficial thing, someone has a less than perfect response to treatment, and we just typically all say, "Oh, it's a healing reaction, don't worry about it." And that may be true, but I wanted us to, as a profession, because as we get more scrutinized by the public and by society at large, we're going to have to be able to speak up about these things with some depth, some honesty. And so I think there's a way for us to really dig into that subject of less than pleasant responses to acupuncture. I don't like the word adverse, but I don't know what the right word is. So let's
try on that. Maybe we'll come up with something.
But I think there's a way to differentiate and pick it apart and actually identify many different possible things that are going on.
Well, let's look at some of those, because I too hear, and you hear this a lot in the, I'm using air quotes here, alternative health world, about a healing crisis. And a question that I've had, ever since I've been doing acupuncture is, okay, what's the difference between a healing crisis and a screwed up treatment? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
If our medicine is as powerful as we like to think it is, and we can really help people, wouldn't it stand to reason that we could also really take them off the rails?
Mm-hmm. It is. It's very powerful. I practice acupuncture without herbs. And I keep saying to people, this is seriously powerful medicine. The stuff I've witnessed in my clinic over 20 years is very powerful. It's not just this light, fluffy thing.
Yeah. So let's start with healing crises. How do you know what's a real healing crisis and what's just, oops, I goofed that one up?
Such a complex question. Well, I think the word healing crisis, maybe we want to dispense with, because I think that comes from somewhere else. I think maybe it comes from homeopathy. I'm not sure.
It does. Yeah. They do talk about that.
Perhaps significantly due to sort of Jeffrey Yuen and all of his students, although it's elsewhere in our medicine for sure. There's, we're sitting on top of a 2,000-year-old history and framework of understanding of the body as a series of layers and levels and depths. And the whole idea that as we proceed through life, we encounter all kinds of bumps and bruises, whether they're emotional or physical. And there's that whole concept that, we either deal with them in the moment or they get embodied in some way and go into our body, and they get stored there. The term we use in English has become latent pathogens in some way, and they can sit there forever, or they can cause trouble, or they can go deeper. And I think often what we do, I've witnessed it time and time again with acupuncture, is we mobilize those things, we get them moving. And so I don't know if it's a correct direct translation. I'd have to speak to a homeopath, but rather than healing crisis, I prefer to speak within our medicine as, mobilization of latency. And that can be unpleasant. It can be mildly unpleasant or severely unpleasant. I've witnessed many examples of it in my practice. And I think particularly in the social and medical context of our culture, the minute someone has a reaction to something that's not pleasant, you immediately go into a whole, let's face it, we live in a very litigious culture. We live in a very simplified cause and effect framework of life culture, which is well past its due date. And so in the context, it's difficult. I get different kinds of clients or patients. Some people are ready to have a deeper discussion, and some people, the minute there's something bad happens, they go running back to their doctor and get treated for what happened from their acupuncture treatment, and I never see them again. And so there's quite a spectrum there. But so part of the adversity that I'd like to keep in the conversation is whether the patient themselves is actually ready for it.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. So often people will come in because of their knee or because of their back or anxiety. I'm using air quotes because I never know what that means to anyone when they say it to me. I always have to inquire. But they come in because something's bothering them and they just want it to go away.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes something has been dogging somebody for decades, right? You're talking about latency, unresolved issues, traumas, or illnesses. But something has been dogging them. Something has actually been really, really loyal to them. And it is not going away until it gets dealt with in some way. And they've done a great job of keeping it below consciousness.
Yep.
Until they can't.
And even their mainstream medicine has supported that effort.
Let's hear it for psychoactive drugs, right?
Yeah, there's so many examples. But yeah, they may be coming in for what they think is small, but from our perspective, we immediately see it as the tip of the iceberg. And after 20 years of experience, I actually experience this now. I'll get a new patient. They'll come in for some little thing, this little thing that's bugging me on my fourth toe, and I'll take the whole history. I do Japanese palpatory acupuncture. I'll palpate everything, and I'll be sitting there thinking to myself, oh God, I'm pretty sure we're going to stir up a rat's nest here or a hornet's nest or whatever. And then I look at the patient and I ask myself, are they ready for this?
That sounds super reassuring to me, that you've got some diagnostics, you've got some ways of inquiring directly with the body to go, what else is here?
Yeah.
What's happening here? Because then we don't get blindsided, right? If you don't know that is there, and you do a treatment and kaboom, something happens, it's like, God, now what? But
I still get that too.
Yeah.
I had it just the other day.
Tell us about that.
Just the other day. Okay, this is humbling because I've been in practice 20 years. It was easy to think you know everything, right? This 80-year-old woman. I live in a place where a lot of people come here just for the summer. So she's what I call a summer visitor. She shows up. She's very bullheaded and she's bossing me around. Okay. And even after 20 years, and I've gotten pretty good with a lot of people, she's exceptionally good at bossing me around. And so I hate to admit it, but I kind of succumbed. And she has wicked neck pain. She can't turn her head at all. It's killing her, and I want it fixed now. And the last time I had acupuncture 10 years ago, it worked in one treatment. I want you to do that. So,
No pressure.
okay, sure. So she's a summer visitor. So I know, she's not a long-term patient. It's just kind of, okay, get her through her vacation and get her home or what. Not vacation. She has a cottage here. So she's here for a month. So I did one treatment and she got up, oh, it's no better. And she was a little bossy with me. And then she left. And Michael, the next day, she called. She said, that night I broke out in a sweat. I got very weak and wicked diarrhea, just watery, runny diarrhea that won't stop. It's like, I'm going. And she's like, she went to the outpatients at the hospital. And I'm thinking, I mean, okay, could be coincidence, who knows? But of course, the reasonable thing to suggest is, what did I must have unleashed something. I must have misdiagnosed, something. She's 80 years old, right? Which is, so I'm just like, holy cow, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't seen her. We've talked on the phone. She went to the hospital. I mean, I gave her good advice. I said, let's keep in touch, keep me in the loop with the diarrhea and the weakness and I said, keep drinking fluids. I suggested ginger tea. I suggested all the things we would suggest but she was getting a thorough workup from the hospital. They were suggesting C. difficile, which she hadn't been in a hospital in years. So anyway. But I called her every other day. How you doing? And she said, by the way, my neck's all better. I think you're amazing. it's like, she, I don't know. That's another part of this picture is we can kind of get away with a lot of this because people don't realize we're practicing a comprehensive framework of medicine. So they don't know the connections. And so they often don't suspect that things are triggered by what we do because they don't see the connections that we see. I'm not sure she suspected that my treatment triggered that, but I'm certain it did, and I still don't know how or why because I haven't seen her since. Although she assured me in our last phone call the hospital had cleared her of everything. She's now feeling fine. But an 80-year-old woman 3 hours after your treatment becomes very weak, starts sweating profusely, and has severe diarrhea. That's a little nerve-wracking. I did something, and I don't know what I did.
Yeah. What happened, right?
Or something happened.
Something happened. And this is such a good question. And I think it's one thing when patients come in and they say, I got this, I got that. You get the history. I mean, all this kind of makes sense, right? We put in our little boxes. Oh, yeah, I know what to do about that. And then when we see a response and it's so unexpected, right? Of course, first there's that emotional moment of, oh, shit.
Yeah. What?
Yeah. Now what? I think that's a really human response. I suspect any healing professional, any medical professional, goes through that from time to time.
Anybody, even Western modern medicine.
Of course. Right?
Probably happens every day.
Well, of course it happens every day. I mean, their stuff is super strong. And if you look at the possible side effects of, most any medication, the list is longer than your arm.
Right.
So they're aware of that. But, to be able to take something that's a surprise and go, wow, I thought I knew what was going on. How do I make sense of this? And this is one of the great things about the medicine we practice. While there's all kinds of different methods and there's many streams of medicine, and often we're actually arguing with each other, which I suspect is very counterproductive. At the root, there is a set of principles that we all share.
Sure.
And that set of principles, if we can somehow touch in on that, my suspicion is it can be helpful in helping us unpack what these responses are that we see.
Yeah, I'm sure if I'd seen her over the next couple of visits and delved deeper into her issues, paid more attention to her pulse, and probably would have figured out some reason for why that happened, which might have, if she was a long-term patient, actually deepened our capacity to go somewhere.
Right. Yeah. And then there's the other thing, which is maybe she stopped at Joe's Cafe and that burger was a little not,
We don't know.
We don't know. Yeah. We end up with a lot of not knowing. But her neck pain got better.
She thinks I'm awesome.
I'm wondering if you've seen this. I suspect you have. People come in, you ask, how you doing? How you doing? Right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll hear something like, oh, maybe a little better.
Oh.
Right. And I find that means one of two things. It means
Yeah,
nothing has changed. I'm
right.
being nice, or it means everything has changed and I've already forgotten I had the problem.
Yeah, you're making a brilliant point. I've actually gotten really punchy about responding to that. I think a little better. Or the one I hate even more is, well, I'm no worse. I, I, I
Oh.
I immediately push it back at them. I say, look, are you just being nice to me? Because I don't want you to be nice to me. That's one thing I say. And another thing I say is, well, a little better means mostly not better, right? Like,
Mhm.
1 plus 99 equals 100. So if you're 1% better, you're 99% not better. So, and then they say, oh yeah. And then I dig deeper. I say, so why did you say that? And then I repeat to them why they came in. I say, well, when you came in, you said this, and this. Has that changed? And then usually we pick it out. It's either they're really not better, but they're just being nice,
Mhm.
or actually they're a little better than they wanted to admit.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that I use to keep my practice running smoothly. So, let's talk about something that can be a little bit uncomfortable: raising your fees. I know, this is something that might feel awkward, but it doesn't have to. With a bit of planning and care, you can handle it in a way that feels right for you and your patients. One tip: give yourself at least 2 months to prepare. This gives you time to get comfortable with the change and let your patients know what's happening. You can share the news through emails, booking reminders, or even just a friendly little sign in your clinic, and avoid over apologizing. Instead, keep it straightforward and matter of fact. Keeping things consistent across the ways that you communicate can really help avoid confusion. Fee increases aren't always easy, but you're not on your own here. For more tips and ideas on how to communicate these changes with confidence, check out frontdesk.chain.app and look for the article, How to Tell Your Clients You're Raising Your Fees. Oh, and one last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Yeah, and sometimes they're like phenomenally better and they have amnesia. This to me, this is such a curious thing to me. It's like they drop into this natural state of where they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's like the best treatments are the ones that they don't notice.
Yeah, that's very humbling for us, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah, no, we get that all the time too. But that's fine.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. I actually like it when that happens for
Or
people.
then, I mean, there's so many. I mean, this is getting a little off topic, but like I practice in a smallish town, so I bump into my patients all the time at the grocery store.
Hmm.
You know, so like someone you'll finish a few treatments with someone, and they'll say, "Well, I'm not sure it's working. I'm going to stop now." And then you'll run into them a year later in the grocery store, and they'll say something like, "You changed my life."
There seems to be a thing with trajectory.
Yeah,
Sometimes there's like a little shift that happens and you don't notice it.
yeah,
Like you barely notice it. It's like the turn of a season. Like this morning here in St. Louis, I walked outside and it's chilly. It was chilly enough that it's like, oh, I'm putting socks on.
yeah.
It's the first time I put socks on in months. But they're like tiny changes and you don't even hardly notice it until a season or two goes by.
In retrospect, some kind of retrospect.
Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah, but the fascinating thing is, what's our medicine about? It's about change. So this is really interesting.
So let's get back to this thing about lingering pathogens or physiological issues, traumas, things that have not found their way to resolution. What's your sense of what's going on with all this?
Well, I mean, I love it. I think that's what better strength of our medicine is there than to help people express to the outside what's lingering. I mean, that's what's in the way.
Yeah.
But that's a very different. I mean, I think that's what's radically different about our medicine. I mean, I see it all the time. I'll needle a channel, and the patient will come in the next week and say, I developed this huge. Did you stick a needle here? And they'll point to this boil, this big boil on the channel. And I'll say, no, not even close. And then it turns out in their history, we delve into there's some reason for some latent toxic heat to be in that part of their system. Maybe they had some major infection a few years ago, or they had surgery along that channel somewhere, and they were in the hospital with post-surgical infection or something. So that, that's just at the simplest level. I see that all the time. Some kind of boil or skin reaction along a channel, or in some channel relationship to what I did. That's just good. That's nothing but good from our perspective, that they expressed that. You don't want that lingering. And I think we provoke that all the time. I think often it's even below the radar. We may not even know we've provoked it. I always like to say, in the treatment room, there's 10,000 things happening, and I'm lucky if I can see 20 of them. So, but I mean, I've had some pretty radical and dramatic cases. Like, I had one woman, I'll never forget this, and she was a massage therapist, and this is only what we discovered was only discoverable by the fact that she knew her body so well as a massage therapist. But we did a series of treatments, and she started to develop skin reactions after each treatment. And because she's a massage therapist, she actually mapped the skin reactions for me each week.
Ooh, that's helpful.
So first of all, most patients after the first treatment would have called and said, I don't think I'll come back. They would have gone to their doctor, gotten steroids and suppressed the skin reaction, and concluded that they have some kind of quote unquote allergy to acupuncture or something. And that would have been the end of that.
Mm-hmm.
But because she was in the alternative health field and she was a massage therapist, she was curious, she was interested, she trusted the process, and she mapped the skin reactions. And it was stunning, Michael. You could actually see over a course of 6 treatments that her body was expressing something through our 6 levels on the yang side. So first, I can't, honestly, it was a long time ago, I can't remember, but let's say first it was expressed on the yang ming aspects of her body, then the xiao yang, then the tai yang. I forget the order, but it was very clear that every 2 weeks it progressed through distinct yang stages, and then it was gone, and it never came back. She got all better, and I saw her a year later, and she said, I've just had the best year of my life. So clearly that was radical, and that's an example of something that's an example of something that I probably would have never seen in another patient, because A, they might have never come back after the first week, or B, they wouldn't have had the knowledge or the curiosity or the interest to map it. So that case just offered that opportunity to really witness a profound process that's fully in line with our whole framework.
Yeah, exactly.
Of her body getting rid of a latent pathogen.
Through the levels that they talk about it going through.
Exactly. It was very clear.
Well, this is, I'm like making a note to myself here that the next time something seems a little bit off the rails, to see if I can somehow engage my patient's curiosity about that. It's like, is there a way that I can get them involved in mapping it? Some people, they come in with a list, right? It's like, how you doing? They pull out a little notebook and they got everything written down.
Right.
Right.
Or 2 typed pages for you.
Yeah. And others are just more like, well, I don't know. So I suspect it has something to do with the patient's personality, whether you could enlist them in that process. But it seems like that would be very helpful if we could.
Yeah, but I really, really, really believe strongly that where we go with each patient is unique to the degree to which you're ready, and the degree to which they're ready, and the degree to which we're ready.
Ooh.
And so each trajectory of a clinical encounter, I believe, is constrained or defined by that unique combination. So there's no one trajectory. I mean, you have patients you can go far with, and you have patients who the dynamic between the two of you is just such that you're just not going to go very far.
I think that's a really good point. A patient may be willing, we may not have the wherewithal.
We may not, or we may be ready, but they may not.
I've seen that. I had someone just the other day. Remember asking them a question about something that to me made a lot of sense. And I got this blank stare back, like, is there supposed to be an answer to that question?
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, okay, well, let's connect where we can connect. And then I'll just wait for you to tell me what the next step is.
Exactly. But I think we also have to be careful because there's also that kind of, I've heard people in alternative medicine in general slip a little too superficially into, well, they just weren't ready. We have to be a little careful and
Oh, I think we need to be very careful around that.
stay very humble on our side too. Because it's also possible that they're ready, but they just don't trust you yet.
Well, why should they? I mean, if they've just met us,
Yeah. And maybe they've been betrayed by medicine 50 times already. We don't know.
well, it's interesting that you say betrayed by medicine. I often feel like I see refugees from the conventional medical system. And oddly enough, I mean, before we started rolling tape here today, we were talking about stuff, and I said, "Yeah, I never expected to be involved in medicine. That
Yeah.
that was never on my radar. That came in from the periphery." And partly because, yeah, with the best of intentions, I was betrayed as a child with the medicine, with conventional medicine.
Well, I have another interesting, I mean, we can turn this whole thing on its head and use our medicine to evaluate modern medicine. So, which is something I find a prospect that I find fascinating, but will never happen on a significant level until we're equal partners with modern medicine in the system, if that ever comes to pass. But a great example, I had someone come in once for psoriasis, and when I took her history, she actually had a bad case as a little child, 2 or 3 years old, of strabismus, which is it's an eye muscle issue, and was subjected to surgery to cut some of the muscles on the side of her eye so that her eye stopped deviating out to the left, I think.
Mm.
And so that's at age 3. Now, if you read Julian Scott's pediatric book, he's very clear that strabismus in children is a lingering pathogenic factor, and he's got a whole thing about it. So then in her 20s, she developed severe ulcerative colitis and wound up having a bowel resection. And then in her 30s, she developed severe psoriasis, and that's when she showed up in my clinic. Now, and we treated her, and she actually got better, but that's beside the point. The point I'm making here is that we can look at that and say, well, that's interesting. Imagine if an acupuncturist had treated her strabismus as a kid. We might have, in line with everything we've just talked about for the last half hour, helped her body expel the lingering pathogenic factor that was implicating the strabismus, and maybe stop this whole progression altogether. But modern medicine, we have to be careful. This is just a suggestion, but we certainly have strong capacity in our medical frameworks in Chinese medicine to say that modern medicine drove that pathogen deeper and deeper and deeper.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so we can also look back at the other half of medicine in our culture and make suggestions about adverse effects.
Yes, we could. They probably wouldn't be seen that way. One of the things I find that we're up against here is, how do you measure something that didn't happen? Right? I mean, you can measure something that's formed and present,
Right.
right? Evidence-based medicine, I'm using air quotes here, all the different kinds of blood tests and imaging, I mean, all these things, we can find stuff that's formed, we can find stuff that's present.
Yeah.
But how do you recognize that you've swept the stones and branches out of a person's path so they didn't trip on them? I mean, there's really no way to measure this, right? I mean, we like to talk about it, and we can make some great stories about it. And from our perspective, yeah, you clear something out at age 3, they don't have to.
What have you prevented?
What have you prevented? There's no way to measure it.
No way. And you could have prevented a lot.
We could prevent a lot.
I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. I think the biggest thing we're up against is, what philosophers call materialistic science, which, is predicated on, if you can't measure it, it's not real.
It doesn't exist.
I like to say, I've noticed in most of the arguments and debates I get in with people, whatever we're talking about, we could be talking about climate change, Donald Trump, the Middle East, medicine, doesn't matter. If you look underneath, you notice that people tend to fall into, to be simplistic, 2 camps. One camp predicates its perception on the fact that we know almost everything and we're just cleaning up the details. And the other camp is predicated on the notion or the posture that, well, we still almost know nothing.
Mm.
And I think that sets in motion most people's capacity to have the kind of discussion we're having. I like to suggest that it's both. That the problem isn't saying it's one or the other. That actually we know a hell of a lot and it's impressive, and at the same time we also don't know much.
That's a very Chinese medicine way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and so your point about how can we talk about something we can't measure? Just because we can't measure it doesn't mean we can't see it. And I often think you're working with a patient, let's say on some kind of kidney or liver issue, and they happen to be getting blood tests from their doctor at the same time, and like their liver enzymes are getting better as you're treating them, or their creatinine levels are improving as you're treating them, and so we like to think, oh wow, it's actually really happening. but my reference point is never to forget that the creatinine or the liver enzymes is probably at best 2% of everything that's going on. So it's awesome that they're getting better at on as a creatinine or a liver enzyme measurement. That's awesome. It's fantastic. But let's not forget that 98% of what's improving isn't included in that measurement.
I think that's such a good point. And I think it's so easy for us to point to some of the Western diagnostics and go, see, look, it proves that our medicine, it's really happening. Exactly. It's like research, a lot of research. You see this stuff come across Facebook, or you'll see it in different places. Oh, acupuncture is shown to blah, 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 blah. And we use research as marketing.
It's so powerful. It's so seductive.
It tells a very compelling story in our modern materialistic world.
Absolutely. But so let's say a patient has 6 treatments with you, and they come back and they say, wow, my liver enzymes are normal, or my blood sugar's normal. And my husband's saying that he hasn't felt this way about our relationship since we got married 35 years ago. So good about it. What impresses you more? Or they come in after 6 treatments and say, I'm finally decided to quit the job that's been killing me for the last 30 years.
Right. Yeah. When people make those really big changes, or they come in because of problem X, and then they notice that, well, I still got my problem X, but my sleep is like this, and wow, my bowels are really working well. And,
Exactly.
I've noticed that my children are not so irritating.
That's a great point. I've always wondered, like, for example, one symptom that's notoriously difficult to treat with acupuncture is tinnitus, right? But
Yeah. Yeah.
but people come in for it, and then we do a bunch of treatments, and like 25 other things get better, but the tinnitus doesn't. And then that begs the exact question you just asked: is what is it we're treating, and what's important? And one symptom may have brought them in, but of course, we're treating the whole system.
Yeah. And sometimes I was going to say, we don't even know the depth of what we're touching into. And I was going to back off from that, but actually, I think I'm going to stick with it. Yeah. Often I know in my practice,
Yeah,
I think I know what I'm doing. And then
yeah,
patients will say something, or like we're talking about, there's a response of some sort that's surprising and maybe frightening to them.
yep.
And I think we need to take that stuff seriously. It's like, wow, here's some very useful information. How do we put that all together? If they come back, right? I mean, I've had people that called me and said, am I supposed to have numbness in my hands and feet after acupuncture?
Yeah, yep.
And I'm thinking, oh God, I hope I wrote good clinic notes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, where did that come from?
Well, I am finding that more and more patients, and these are ones I find rewarding and I love working with them, really do recognize this as a process. And it's a bumpy process. And there's, getting back to our main theme of adverse reactions, it's a bumpy process. There's ups and downs. We can trigger things that are not welcomed, but are part of the process. So, those are the ones, I mean, that's the rewarding work, right?
It is. Well, let me ask you this, especially if the patient is a bit freaked out.
Yeah.
How do you invite them into that process? How do you invite them into, oh, there's something here. Shall we see what's here?
Well, I think the first point is what we talked about earlier. You can only take the process. The process is first limited by both how far you're willing and able to go, and how far they're willing and able to go. That's the first thing, is to really look at that, like, because you're going to get in trouble if you try to go somewhere that either you or the patient don't have the capacity to go to. That's the first thing. But then if everything's good and everything, then I just really work hard to win their trust, just to say, can we let's trust the process. First of all, I say, you've got my cell phone number. It's
Mm.
with me all the time. A lot of assurance. You can call me on Sunday morning if something happens. Call me anytime. If you get my voicemail, leave a message. I'll call you right back. All that stuff to let them know I'm with them. And then I say, if you're willing, if you're interested, I've been at this, 20, I can use my 20-year thing. And I've seen this a lot. 99.9% of the time, it's not a bad thing in the long run. Can you just surrender a bit and trust the process? I'm with you. Let's continue. But then I'll also let them know, but look, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. Don't worry about me. You want to, some people actually don't want to upset their doctors, right? That's a big thing. I even let them know, don't worry about me. If you want to cancel the next appointment and think about it, no problem. I just try to set the whole context in a very kind of assured, trustworthy frame.
And let them know you're available. I'm here. I'm not leaving you hanging.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any, I'm going to call them like early warning signs, anything that you sometimes might pick up in the pulse or the tongue or your palpatory work that lets you know, ooh, might be an iceberg here, might be something else here? Do you have things that tip you off?
Well, more just my experience. I mean, I think particularly in the whole depression and anxiety field, if someone's been medicated for a long time, I'm always very quick to warn them, this could be a rocky road. Are you ready for that?
Mm,
And I let them know I'm there with them. And then in the long run, I feel confident we can probably do great work together. But are you ready for this?
yeah.
And do you have the supports in place? Do you have a good husband or wife? Do you have brothers or sisters? Do you have good friends? Because sometimes it's easy, but sometimes I've had patients who have gone off the rails emotionally. It's just too much.
Well, we're not psychotherapists.
Nope.
And yet, at the same time, because of the kinds of questioning that we do, because we do have this rather holistic, I hate that word, holistic approach. We need different language, but in some ways, because we see the mind and the body as an integrated fabric woven completely together, we cannot help but tread into some of the area that a psychotherapist would tread into, just because we're asking certain kinds of questions and because we're attending to certain aspects of who a patient is. What are your thoughts about treading into some of the psychoemotive material that is bound to come up because it's just part of who a person is, and we tend to invite a whole person into the treatment?
Well, I personally feel very comfortable with all of it. Like, it doesn't bother, I'm not nervous about that at all. But I think each of us is different based on our own experience. I think that's the half of what we've been talking about that's important. It's not just, is the patient ready, it's, are we ready too? And if we're not, then let's not go there. Let's be quick to say, okay, we need to get a therapist on board here too. That's one thing. The other thing, of course, is depending on the jurisdiction you're in, you could be into some scope of practice conundrums, just legally or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I've heard of situations where acupuncturists have been sued for doing psychotherapy.
But our medicine offers so much, not in the regard of the integration of mind, heart, body, etc.
Yeah, well, we never saw it as separate.
Exactly.
I mean, saying that they're integrated still predisposes the idea that it's separate.
I mean, I like to say, your frustration and your liver enzymes are one thing.
Imagine this. A patient walks into your clinic. They're carrying more than the pain in their body. There's a story there. A history woven with the stress of long days, the ache of things unsaid, and the quiet longing for something to shift. You listen, not just with your ears, but with your hands, your intuition, your heart. It's not just about needles or a formula. It's about connection. Understanding the threads that tie us together, mind, body, and spirit. That is where golden flower Chinese herbs comes in. Rooted in tradition and crafted with care, their formulas are more than herbs. They're a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern practice. Every bottle, a quiet partner in your work, helping you to meet your patients where they are. Because healing isn't just about treating symptoms. It's about creating trust, cultivating belonging, and helping someone feel truly seen. Golden Flower Chinese Herbs, your partner in practice and connection, where tradition meets care. Yeah. Oh, let's dive into that for a moment, because there's sometimes this idea. Think about the organs and the organ functions, and if we let it slip, oh, I'm worried about your liver. People are like, oh God, my liver. What, do I have cirrhosis? What?
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and then often one says, no, I'm not talking about that liver. I'm talking about other liver. It has nothing to do with it. But what I hear you saying is it absolutely has something to do with it.
It does, but I mean, I agree with you 100%. Many years ago, I stopped using the terms liver and kidney unless I'm really pushed by the patient. It's kind of weird. Part of my evolution clinically is I now think more in terms of Tai Yin, Xiaoyang, Jui Yin.
Oh, tell us more about that. That's really caught my attention in the past few years as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of evolved. I think it was after I did Dr. Ed Neal's online aging studies program, and that just got me thinking more in clinic. Oh, and then I remember I started doing Ren Ying Sun Co pulses for about 2 years with every patient. And it just, my own predilection is that, this is going to sound a bit extreme, but I'll say it extremely just to get people's attention. I don't I don't care about people's symptoms. I want to go deeper. Of course I care, but I'm just saying that for shock value.
Mm-hmm.
But
you don't get stuck with just a symptom.
But my inquiry in clinic has taken me to a place where I really do first and foremost try to focus on treating the 6 levels. At what level is this problem? And I know the levels in a scholarship way in herbal medicine and acupuncture are very different concepts. It's not clear, and I'm just an acupuncturist, but I do find, based on palpation, which is what I do, that's how I intake my patients primarily, is palpation, is that shockingly in 70 to 80% of my patients, I find most of their issues are either in I think you had a recent conversation with somebody about this with Sa'am acupuncture, are either in Tai Yin Yang Ming or Xiaoyang Jui Yin or Xiaoyin Tai Yang. I just find that it's like it's blowing me away. It's like it just keeps showing up. So I'll focus the treatment on one of those 3 quartets of channels. And the treatments are very powerful that way, I find. And so I've actually gotten to the point where that's, regardless of their symptoms, that's what I'm treating, is which levels and which channels are screaming to be treated here. And the amazing thing is that it takes you away from the symptoms alone. Of course, as you know, anything can be anything.
Right.
It really can. I mean, six cases of colitis can be 6 completely different problems.
Right. Is it a Tai-Yin colitis or
Exactly.
is it a Jui-Yin colitis?
I had a patient in recently, and she's a physiotherapist. She knows her body. All of her symptoms lined up on Yang Ming. All of them. It was like, this is cool. One of those moments of, wow, this is cool. From her toes to her nose, everything lined up on Yang Ming. And I got seduced by that. And I treated Yang Ming for like 6 treatments. And there was no response. In fact, her colitis was almost getting worse.
Oh man!
So I did what I call an etch-a-sketch moment, where I just said, okay, it's time to go tabula rasa, clear the screen, and start over.
Etch-a-sketch moment.
When you shake that screen and start over. And she, because she's a physiotherapist, she was with me. She said, okay, let's do this.
Let's do this.
I'm just going to reevaluate everything. I retook her pulse, repalpated her body. And Michael, everything showed up as in Jui Yin. Everything. I mean, even on her pulse, you could feel this heat in the blood level. So I gave her a Jui Yin Xiaoyang treatment. And poof, she called me and said, my colitis just got like 80% better in a week.
Holy smokes. Okay. Hang on a second. I want to unpack this a little bit. This is
Like,
this
so
is
I just pay less and less attention to the symptoms, and I evaluate the channels.
Mhm.
And so then getting back to your original, let me just finish getting back to your original question. People want to know how. I don't mention liver anymore. I don't mention kidney. I try to just be quiet and just do my work and say, I'm just working on which channels are obstructed here.
Two things. First, I want to get into what you were seeing as Yang Ming and how you had that etch a sketch moment. I want to unpack that a little bit, and then I want to talk a little bit about Dr. Huang's work and why that caught my attention and why this 6th level thing now is so juicy to hear. But tell us more. You said everything was toes to nose Yang Ming. What were you looking at, and then how were you able to go, oh yeah, well, I mean, obviously 6 treatments, it didn't help. It's clear you need an etch a sketch moment. What is it later that you went that drew you to the Drayin? How did you get from Yang Ming to Drayin?
Okay, well, she came in because her large intestine 5, what do they call it? The anatomical snuff box there on her right hand.
Oh yeah.
The tendons there at large intestine 5
Right.
were just causing her unbelievable daily grief. That's why she came in. I mean, this is a perfect example of the tip of the iceberg, right?
Mhm.
I mean, she came in because part of her wrist was bugging her. And she couldn't do downward dogs in yoga. She couldn't even do her work. It was killing her. And then it turned out I can't remember, she had some weird problem with her second toe on the right side. She has chronic rhinitis, and she would point exactly to large intestine 20 and say, it always hurts right here. She had intestinal colitis. I mean, the list went on, and I'm just going, literally from your toes to your nose.
Right.
All your symptoms are lined up on one channel. This is incredible. So I got seduced by that, as we do. It's very seductive.
Yeah.
And I just said, oh man, we got to treat Yang Ming. And actually, I did the symptoms she came in for got all like 90% better. Her wrist issue at large intestine 5, after just 2 or 3 treatments, got all better. And she kept coming, which was interesting, which tells me, okay, she's coming for something deeper. And then we start talking about her colitis. And I said, well, I mean, I've actually had great success with colitis. So I said, I should be able to help that. It usually responds well. But it wasn't. And I mean, I'm the kind of guy, after 3 to 6 treatments, if something's not responding, I'm like, okay, I'm missing something here.
Yep.
So that's when I did I'll be candid and admit that I got lazy. I felt so confident about Yang Ming that I actually stopped freshly evaluating her every visit. I would just launch into my Yang Ming treatment.
Right. Well, this is the problem of thinking that we know.
Yeah, I got sucked in by my own, arrogance or whatever. And so the etch a sketch moment was, okay, I need to back off here and just pretend I know nothing. And then I repalpated her. I mean, I practiced the whole palpatory Japanese thing combined with Jason Robertson's work with Wang Ju Ying, and it's a whole palpation approach. And when I repalpated her, all the reactivity was on pericardium and liver channels. Way in. And then when I took her pulse, there was, at that blood level, there was some kind of toxic heat thing, and her colitis had gotten quite bloody. So I just said, okay, I gave her what I call a Jueyin Xiaoyang treatment. And poof, she emailed me or called me a few days later and said, wow, like, I'm a lot better.
There it is, the power of the 6 confirmations. We talk about it a lot in herbal medicine, and one of the things I love about Dr. Huang's work, he really looks at constitutional types. He was really one of the first guys to get me thinking outside the usual boxes that I was used to thinking in.
Right.
And then eventually that led me to some of the work of Dr. Hu Shu and Feng Lun, right? Suzanne Robideau.
Yeah, I'm doing her course right now in Toronto. Yeah.
So the way that those cats look at the 6 levels, holy smokes,
Yeah.
that's a whole different amusement park ride right there, right?
Radical. Yeah.
And the thing that I love about it is Hu Shu and Dr. Feng Lun, they really look at, okay, what levels are being touched by this, I'm using air quotes here, illness. We're not looking at the illness. We're not like, okay, they got colitis. It's like, okay, where are the tentacles of this thing going into?
Yeah.
Where are the levels? go to those levels.
Like where the body's screaming in terms of symptoms is not necessarily where the problem is.
Yeah. Yeah. And conveniently, we have these other ways of looking and going, so what's affected? What else is involved? I mean, we were talking about the Sa'am Korean acupuncture, right? Toby Daly was on recently. We had that interview. Toby's been really generous with me. I've been starting to use this stuff in clinic, and I have to call him up from time to time and hit him with some clinical questions about this. One of the things that I find so interesting about that type of acupuncture, it really looks at the 6 conformations.
Yeah.
It's really working at that level.
The burning question I have, I mean, I'm not a scholar in terms of translating classics and all that, but what I get from the people who study this stuff is the 6 levels in acupuncture and the 6 levels in herbal medicine are not the same thing. But I don't know.
I don't.
I don't know.
There's the answers you have to give on the national exam about what the 6 levels are.
Right.
There's that piece. And then again, you look at Hu Shishu and Feng Shilun, they're looking at it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And I want to bring up this other piece. This is just something I've been chewing on here. Like you, I'm about 20 years into this. So that makes me a good solid journeyman.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I'm a good solid journeyman at this point. I'm a little beyond apprentice. I'm a solid journeyman. We talk about the scholars. We talk about the masters, but my suspicion is very few of us are going to be scholars.
Yeah.
Probably even fewer are going to be masters.
Yeah.
Most of us, the best shot we got at this, solid journeyman.
I agree.
And I think there's a lot to be learned and gleaned in that. Our own clinical experience bumped up against, like in this conversation, someone else's clinical experience, bumped up against some stuff that we've read, bumped up against what actually happens in the clinic.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the rubber hits the road, right?
I think so. I remember one of my teachers in acupuncture school saying, if you go to a really good acupuncture school, you learn about 12% of what you need to know.
Yeah.
And if you go to an average one, you learn 8% of what you need to know. All the rest you're going to learn from your patients.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So true.
Right?
And it's perpetual. I mean, I get humbled regularly and after 20 years. And look at the trouble I get into if I get too cocky about it.
Well, I've found this to be true as well. As soon as I think I kind of got this one dialed in, or I pat myself on the back, man, it's just asking for trouble.
What's that? There's a great Bob Dylan line. There's no success like failure, and failure is no success at all, or something like that.
I don't know. I have to look that one up. That sounds. I didn't know he was an acupuncturist. Man, this has wandered far and wide, hasn't it?
Yeah. We were talking about adverse reactions.
And we've come back to the 6 levels keeps banging around here. So one of the things that I've found, and Toby Daly talked about this in his interview, and he talks about in his fantastic article that he did in the Journal of Chinese Medicine.
I just downloaded that.
Yeah, you can get it from the website as well. Yeah. Get it from Qiological if you want. It's over there too. One of the things that he talks about is that if you're on with this stuff, you can really help people. And if you're off with it,
right,
you can really send them off the rails. And I'm here to tell you, I have sent some people off the rails with this in the process of attempting to learn it.
Really?
Yeah, I had a patient the other day. I'm trying to learn a new system here. And that means on occasion I make a big mistake because I'm still thinking partly in an older system. And so I had a patient with what I'm going to call a spleen excess.
Yes.
Right. Very, tie-in excess. She was a tie-in excess. Very overweight, wet on the inside, and kind of wet on the outside too. And just kind of that very damp, sort of slow thought process and a lot of mental chewing on things.
Right.
And from a TCM point of view, it's like, oh, we got to tonify the spleen. We got to work the spleen. Well, from the Sa'am point of view, you don't tonify the spleen. You don't bring more damp to damp. That would be a bad idea. You want to bring in the cool, high, dry mountain air of the large intestine of the yang ming to dry up some of that
Right.
dampness. That's what you should do. But I was like, oh yeah, her spleen. I got to fix her spleen. So I tonified her spleen.
Yeah.
And I missed the signs and I missed some of the stuff in retrospect, I should have caught. And she comes up after the treatment and goes, am I supposed to feel dizzy and nauseous? And I'm
Oh
thinking, oh
dear.
shit. And at the same time, I'm thinking, oh man, Toby Daly was right about this.
Yes.
So I'm thinking to myself, how do I approach this? Do I say, oh, I made a mistake here, let me fix this now? Or do I sort of file it away? Oh, yep, this is what happens. I'm here, right? I said, I'm going to check in with you tomorrow, which I did. And, basically what happened with that is after a few days, she felt okay again. And I go, okay, be very, very careful, Michael Max, because this is what can happen if you do it wrong. If you see a spleen excess, don't tonify the spleen with Sa'am acupuncture, right? Because we're not working it in a Zong Fu way. We're working it through the 6 conformations.
Yeah.
And so there's a little tick in the chart for me of 6 conformations, very powerful medicine.
Yeah. I mean, don't forget, patients go to their psychiatrist all the time and they say, oh, well, let's try Zoloft.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come back and say, I've got all these terrible side effects. Okay, well, let's try Prozac. I mean, we're awash in a medical culture that tries things, and if they work, great, and if they don't, I mean, there's a lot of educated guesswork going on in modern medicine. So we
Absolutely.
have to give ourselves a little leeway. I believe, as long as you, Michael Max, are coming from a place of high integrity, it's okay. But the response to treatment is part of your diagnosis.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've had one of my herbal teachers,
I mean, if you just keep doing the same stupid thing over and over and over
that
again,
would be a problem.
okay, that's a
Hey, the patient doesn't fit the model. What the hell?
yeah. She's just not ready for it, or something.
Yeah. One of my herbal teachers early on said, you can say that you understand a formula, or you could say you understand an herb when you've used it and it's worked and you know why. And if you've used it and it didn't work and you know why, only then can you say you understand it. So part of our process is to be able to recognize the errors like that. It's part of what we have to do. There's no way around it. I think the question is, how do we engage ourselves and how do we engage our patients to keep the thing moving forward?
Well, my experience is that that's get back to the original point. Where are you at, and where's your patient at? If you're both fairly well along in your maturity and your humility, they're going to stay with you. And if either or both of you aren't, then it's going to go off the rails pretty fast. And
Well, speaking from the practitioner side, what are some of the things that you found helpful over these years that help you stay present with this, that help you to be ready for moments when, oh my gosh, now what?
yeah, that's a great question. I'll never forget my first week in practice. I just graduated from the New England School of Acupuncture, moved back home, opened my clinic. I had 25 patients the first week,
Oh, wow.
some of them like really sick. And I remember just saying, I'm going to go into each, and I've done this for 20 years. I'm not going to go in with any book knowledge. I have all this knowledge, but I'm just going to I'm going to go in like an etch a sketch with each patient, just be there and just take it and trust myself that there's that whole tension between spontaneity and rote knowledge. And I always think of Miles Davis as the archetype of someone who knew a hell of a lot but clearly lived in a receptivity to what spontaneously arises in spite of everything he knew every day. That's kind of my operating principle. What are the military people? My mode of engagement. What do they call it in the military? What's my rule of engagement in that I aspire to every minute? And so I just trust, that the right thing will come up. But it doesn't always work out that way.
Well, that thing about doing the work, learning what you need to know, that's essential. You don't get to do the spontaneous stuff. I mean, like Miles Davis. You don't get to do the Miles Davis, crazy, wild man, amazing thing if you haven't done your scales for, ridiculous amounts of time and listen to all kinds of other music as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So keep reading, folks. Keep learning.
And yet there's that magic moment where you just surrender at the same time.
Yeah, every now and then you hit that sweet spot, don't you? Jazz in clinic, man.
Wish we could hit it every time.
Well, that's why we practice. Daniel, anything else to share with our listeners before we wind this down for today?
The other piece I'd written some notes about, the whole adverse reaction thing is I think one of the flies in the ointment that we don't know about are medications. And I think that often, what is acupuncture doing? It's optimizing physiology. And a lot of medications are dosed at a higher than perfect dose, for example, because of physiological inefficiencies, right? So I've witnessed many times what I believe is, I'm triggering essentially an overdose in someone who's on a medication at a certain dose, comes to get acupuncture, and so their physiology gets optimized and they start using their meds more efficiently. So I think meds are a big unknown in this business. So just pay attention,
That's a really good point. It's really good. I have seen some patients who, they were having issues with the medications working too well. And I suggested, well, why don't you go talk to your doctor? Maybe you don't need as much of this medication. And some of them were like, no, I do not want to mess with my medication. I am stopping this dang acupuncture because it's messing with my medication. They didn't see it as healing. They saw it as being an interference.
And then others are more than happy. Their goal is to get off their meds. So you have to be with the patient where they're at.
You got to be with them where they're at. There you go. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for this time today. This has really been delightful.
Great. Yeah, you're a delight.
That's sweet. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.